Ladies and gentlemen, about 40 minutes ago, you had a choice to stay in this room or go to the one next door. And I'm happy to tell you, you picked the right room to stay in. A wise man once said that theories divide us, but stories unite us. So let's get the theory out of the way really quick. Okay, great. Thank you. Now we can relax and we can have a proper conversation. So what excites me about GameFi, and in fact the entire ecosystem that we're developing, it's the canary in the coal mines. If blockchain gaming works, everything else is going to work, and this is why. There's a big deal that's happening here, and I think we're missing it in terms of all the choice of terms. We talk about tokens and NFTs and DeFi and GameFi, and it can all be very difficult to keep track of what's actually going on. So I'd like to share with you a vision of where we at Zenotta, and if you go to playingfields.com just to follow us in this conversation, you're welcome to. This is where we believe the ecosystem is going to go to and the real potential of what's happening. Okay. I'm such a nerd. I think when I was 8 years old, what I wanted for Christmas was a self-contained biome, right? So everyone wanted sea monkeys. These are the little guys that you feed and they hatch into little shrimp and they swim around. But sea monkeys have a problem. You have to keep feeding them and eventually they die, and that's kind of the end of it. A self-contained biome is when you add something like algae to the sea monkeys. Now the algae can take in as an input energy. They can produce something that's sustainable. The sea monkeys eat the algae and they produce nutrients that keep the algae going. It creates a self-contained loop. And I don't think we've seen a self-contained loop in the blockchain ecosystem, right? And I think the gaming sector is going to be that first self-contained loop, which is very significant. So let's build on that model for a little bit. Potentially, if you just abstract away the details of what's going on, what a miner is doing, much like the algae, is the miner is taking in as input energy and compute power. And what the miner produces is a coin. Okay? And on the other side, if you abstract away the details of, a game should be fun and game should be engaging and all of that, the economic process of a game is to take as input a coin and produce a game item while we play the game. So you almost at this point have a closed loop for the first time. But there's one very critical ingredient that's kind of missing. So now let's switch away from thinking about the sort of application layer and start to think about the infrastructure layer. That's the one thing I hear almost no speaker talk about, is underneath the protocol layer of every coin, there is a growing infrastructure layer. And this infrastructure layer has a lot of potential and value, right? So if you think about what gamers use to play games, it's a GPU card, right? That's the graphics processing unit. And if you think about what mining could be, we could move proof of work mining to a more inclusive mining ecosystem that isn't based on ASICs and ASIC farms that 3 people have access to, right? We could move mining to GPU-based mining. Because now a gamer, when they are playing the game, can be using the GPU game to play the game. And in the evening or morning, depending on when they're playing, they can switch to mining a coin that they can then redeem to put back into the gaming system. And then what you have is a closed loop. So we're getting close to that. We're not quite there yet. The tech is sort of taking shape. But why does having standardization in the infrastructure layer, hardware we can depend on, and a closed loop matter? There are 2 trends that are sort of worryingly global. One is the silicon shortage. There just isn't enough compute power to go around, right? Companies more and more are trying to move storage from just in case to just in time. So we've seen companies move to as a service storage. They're using Google Cloud or Amazon. What if companies could move to just-in-time computation? What if there was a global distributed GPU network that could compute any problem and it was available for rent? The second problem that we have globally is energy. And energy is a weird thing. There's a misnomer we don't have enough energy. Actually, I think America is oversupplied in energy. I think they're 9% too much energy, right? The problem is peak loads. It's at very, very specific times in winter when suddenly the demand for energy spikes. That's the problem, right? And we're building infrastructure, we're polluting the environment, we're doing a lot of damage to have energy just in case. What we can do is we can ask miners at peak time to cycle down their mining rigs, stop mining for that period, and dump the energy that they would be consuming to mining and pipe that energy back into the grid. Sweden is already doing this, right? Abu Dhabi, Dubai are kind of cottoning onto this, and they are creating infrastructure to get miners to come and operate from them. So when I hear announcements like New York wants to ban proof of work mining, I don't think they get it, right? The gaming ecosystem has a second huge advantage, and that is the way it works economically is kind of how we think about economics traditionally. And that's weird for crypto. If you read Catalini and Gans and you kind of look at the problems with a cryptocurrency, it doesn't matter. We won't name any specific cryptocurrency, but if you think about what a contract is, what a smart contract is, it's an instrument. It's instrumentally valuable, right? So I always think of a glass, a cup that holds water as an instrument. Whether I use my hands to drink water or whether I use a cup, I don't really care. It's just a means to an end. The water is the thing that's intrinsically valuable. I have to have that, right? So when we're looking at gaming, I think what we're seeing for the first time is people are producing digital assets that are intrinsically valuable, right? My game avatar, my metaverse character, my identity isn't fungible. I can't just swap it for another identity. I don't think that way, right? When you look at a sort of a what I would call a generation one cryptocurrency that fuels a smart contract, some people see that coin as instrumentally valuable. It's debt settlement. I use it in my contract to settle debt. The other half of the ecosystem is saying it's not instrumentally valuable, it's intrinsically valuable. If I hold it, it will go up in value. But you can't have both. A coin cannot be both an instrument and intrinsically valuable. That's a design conflict. That'll never work. But in games, you're separating that out. On the left, you have the thing of value, the game item. And on the right, you have the instrument that you use to settle the debt, to pay for it. And suddenly you've moved from something very bizarre in tokenomics where it's this weird self-referencing loop and it's not quite sure what value type it is and it doesn't quite work, to the first instance of a self-contained biome, something that is self-sustaining, that's creating value. And if done right, you don't expect to see the price just tank or fall over a cliff, but stabilize. And you expect to see positive growth because for the first time, you've got something very close to a GDP. Well, I mean, okay, so GDP isn't a good measure of economic wealth of a country because 75% of it's speculative, but you know, it's that idea that we're pushing for. And so what I really want to say in closing, we're looking at this whole industry, GameFi, the metaverse, for what it is, and we're missing the point of what it could become. We're treating it as though it's a financial instrument, and we need to start realizing that it's a financial ecosystem. When we realize this and we capitalize the real value of an ecosystem, not just an instrument, and when we realize what we're doing, I think we will move from millions of dollars to billions of dollars. That's really it. That's all I want to say. If we have any questions, if we have time, I'd like to field them.
Yes, anybody has any questions? We have plenty of time for a Q&A.
So far, I thought I get what Zenotta is doing. Now you opened my eyes way further, but can you elaborate a little bit on the vision of the ecosystem that you have in mind and how it will interact with the, well, existing not-so-cool ecosystem that is out there?
Can you repeat the question, Andrew?
Yes, okay, so to repeat the question, the gentleman in the front said he thought he understood what Zenotta does, but now after this presentation, he's getting a bigger vision for it. How is what we're doing compatible, or how does it relate to other ecosystems, and what is Zenotta all about? I love that question because it gives me a legitimate, that wasn't a plant. I didn't ask him to ask that question, but now I get to do a bit of a plug. I liked Fred from Cardano earlier. Who was here for that talk? Just raise your hands, right? So Fred was really saying that, you know, we're far too kind of traditional cryptocurrencies can be quite combative. It can be a lot like religion. You're either in religion A or religion B, but you can't be both, maximalists. And we really have to move away from that, and we really have to start being more collaborative as an ecosystem. if we want to survive the pressures that we're facing from the outside world and really grow to what it's meant to be. Zenotta is trying to do something very, very specific. So if I want to boil it down on a technical level, Unix in 1971 kind of had this profound moment when they said, when you look at any digital system, you can think of it as nothing more than a collection of files, right? In this kind of a weird worldview, my printer is nothing more than a driver file at the end of the network, right? So just take your favorite or not so favorite social media giant Meta. When they deploy, when they roll out, they don't construct themselves as just a set of applications. So if you want smart contracts and application layer, Cardano is great, Ethereum's great, there's a number of those out there. And they're looking at just bringing application layer to blockchain. We're looking at bringing files to blockchain. We're looking to incarnate Unix from a blockchain system, which is really hard to do if you think about it. So the first problem is that data doesn't behave like a token, and you can't treat it like that, right? If I could spend $1 fast enough, if there was enough velocity, $1 could meet all our economic needs as a means of debt settlement. I pay the barber, he buys the Coke, the guy at the Coke merchant goes to the greengrocer. It's about velocity. It's not about necessarily creating new currency. But data doesn't behave like that. You have to create data 100,000 times a day, and you have to delete it the rest of the time. So how you store these things, treat them, and get them to behave is a very, very difficult problem if you really want to bring files into a blockchain environment. It's completely non-trivial. But if you can do that, I can take a JPEG and I can use it as an economic quantity. So if you just think about how you do NFTs at the moment, you might use IPFS to do the data management, and you might use Ethereum to do the data rights. So I'll use Ethereum to buy and sell, but I'll store on IPFS. And that's a problem because who's auditing that what's happening on IPFS is what was promised on Ethereum, right? And that's why you get rug pulls, right? So we're bringing the data management and the data rights together into a single entry. Once you have that, so that's all sort of technical, sort of low level. Once you have that, you can start building, and we must be very careful just to remember the difference between a marketplace and a market. And I don't want to use markets in a very strict economic sense, right? A market is a group of people that have a common objective. You can have a political market, a social market, a legal market, right? They want to play collaboratively with one another. And markets fail when a rational actor makes a rational decision that benefits him, but it doesn't benefit the group. So think about the famous example is a four-way intersection. It's late, we're all coming home from work, and we know if we all just wait our turn, and it's annoying, and we don't block the intersection, we're all going to get home on time. But a rational actor says, you know what, I'm next in queue, and I just can't help the group. And that's market failure, right? And so what Bitcoin and what Ethereum and what blockchains do is they use a very clever pricing mechanism to prevent market failure within a market, right? So that's the markets. The marketplaces are more mundane. They're where you go to shop. They're where you go to buy stuff, right? So we're interested in building markets out of data and getting these markets to interact with one another. So gaming for us is very, very important. Game items price efficiently. Why? Because of competition. What makes markets behave rationally and what makes prices evolve efficiently is strong competition, right? And a way to securitize an asset. Gaming gives you both, uniquely. NFT art does not give you those guarantee. NFT music does not give you that guarantee. NFT gaming does. So in principle, I can go to a bank and I can get a fiat loan against the game item because it's securitized and it's priced efficiently, right? In practice, the banks say, the problem is games are great, but they have to trust the application layer. And maybe at the application layer, you've written some bad code, you don't even know it. A banker doesn't know the quality of your ability to code. So our argument is, don't put your economics into the application layer. Push it down into the blockchain layer. Because in the blockchain layer, it has standardization, it has securitization, it has cybersecurity, right? And that's why sort of standardizing things like ERC20s is so important, because traditional finance can interact with crypto. And so what we're going to see in GameFi, I predict within the next 5 years, we're going to start seeing mutual funds and hedge funds and derivatives being built out of game items, uniquely so. And that's going to be the catalyst to bringing traditional finance and traditional financial thinking into the crypto space. And that's going to get us from 1.3 trillion assets under management today to the forecast of 40 to 100 trillion. And then you start building a stock market and aggregators and dexes. That's why it is so, so important. So yes, it's cool to take soccer where we are. There's some promising games. But in order to realize that vision, it's not a given. The tech isn't built for purpose. You have to kind of massage it to get there. So that's our first vertical. There's a couple of others. We're looking to get into the music industry because they have a real world hurt in collecting revenue and paying artists. So that's something else that we look at. But we also want to expand the idea of fungible data assets, right? And so something that we're very keen to look at is how do people that contribute to open source projects get remunerated? And that kind of shows tangibility of what you can do when you can have files and coins interact atomically without custody at layer one. The other thing I just want to say is we hear a lot, this isn't, I have to choose this carefully. What banks do and the value they extract and what banks should do and the value they could extract are two wildly different things. I don't think blockchain is the enemy of a bank at all. I really, really don't. I think bankers and lawyers, the old kind of, there was a kind of a feeling in the early days of crypto to kind of like stick it to the man and we don't need intermediaries, right? Well, I mean, who of you understand the consequence of a good contract and a bad contract? I don't have that wisdom. So lawyers should be writing smart contracts because they understand historical law and they understand these constructions. So it's really at an age now where we have to become a little bit more mature. We have to realize the traditional world is the output of 6,000 years of human compiled thinking into a very distilled format. It doesn't come from a vacuum. There are very good reasons why these things exist. But bankers and lawyers need to understand that there's a very good reason why blockchain exists. And we need to start bringing these universes together.
Thank you, Andrew, so much. And kudos to you for skipping those slides. You are the first one that has ever done it, and I think you got people's attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.